So whenever we experience something that's like either like hurtful or like an adverse or negative experience, the first thing that the mind wants to do is protect itself. And one of the things that the mind uses to protect itself is what we refer to as coping mechanisms, right? But the tricky thing with coping mechanisms is that they can either be like really good or like start off good, but like end up like developing into something that's quite toxic. It helps to deal with like past hurt so that when you're going into a new situation, you're able to differentiate. Am I experiencing this for it because the relationship is just headed that way, or the relationship was just meant to be that way? Or am I experiencing what I'm experiencing because I'm projecting part of my past hurts, my past traumas? Hi guys, my name is Nqobile, and welcome to Becoming by Nqobile M. If you're new here, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, do the most. Today I have an invisible guest who's joining me from the other side of the camera. And we're just sort of going to piggyback off each other in exploring a question that I'm asked quite commonly, either by friends, clients, or like just people in my space. So the question goes as follows: how does holding on to resentment or a grudge from the past psychologically hurt or impact our current relationships and our ability to trust new people? So firstly, I think this is such a common thing. I think it's something that, like we experience quite a lot as people, obviously as well, like in closer, more intimate relationships, obviously because of the level of expectation, the level of proximity that you share with people that are closer with you. So I've also noticed that it's more difficult to sort of navigate a concept like this for really close or really intimate relationships. So this could be a really close friendship, marriage, a familyship, or like just anything where the nature of the relationship is actually like quite close, so like quite intimate, right? And firstly, I always say this, the brain is wired in a way where it's made to function to always protect itself or to always preserve itself, right? So meaning that whenever we experience something that's like either like hurtful or like an adverse or negative experience, the first thing that the mind wants to do is protect itself. And one of the things that the mind uses to protect itself is what we refer to as coping mechanisms, right? But the tricky thing with coping mechanisms is that they can either be like really good or like start off good, but like end up like developing into something that's quite toxic, and that can quite negatively impact the way in which you relate to other people, right? So when you look at like a question or concept such as this, as holding grudge or holding on to resentment and then letting that interact or interfere with new relationships, the brain is most likely to develop a coping mechanism called projection, where we project what I experienced from one relationship, and I take that and I sort of like project it onto another relationship with someone who's completely unrelated to that experience, someone who literally had nothing to do with it, right? Because you develop that hyper-vigilant type of state of mind where now like you're hyper alert, like you're constantly in a space where you're trying to behave in a way to make sure that I don't experience the same thing again.
Well, while you're saying that, how would you define projection? Because I feel like it's also such a loosely used word nowadays. Like, oh, you're projecting. What is projecting?
Right. So I'm old school, and I remember being in lectures and school halls where they'd use a projector. So where it's like a big device, and then they place a paper onto something, and then they shine a light on like a white blank thing, like a wall or whatever. So whatever's on the paper on the device sort of appears exactly as it is, like on the bigger surface, on the bigger white surface. So that's exactly what projection is. It's when we take something from one place and we project it onto another place that's unrelated to like the original space. So for example, if I experience hurt in the area of, let's say I worked with someone who scammed me. Let's say I employed somebody and this person like scammed me at work, right? And then I employ somebody else, and I still respond to that person the same way that I had responded to the previous person that scammed me. And I think the tricky thing with that is that without realizing it, we end up reenacting a similar situation purely based on how you're responding to that. So, for example, if I'm going to be your business partner, Mawanda, and we're going into business together, and my previous business partner obviously like did me dirty, when I'm interacting with you, I'm not letting you like experience the organic nature of who I am in the business sense. So like all of our deals, I'm gonna like either like second guess you, like constantly, you know what I'm trying to say, like
That's so good,
constantly
yeah.
like be insecure, and like, you know, and what ends up happening is that it ends up like reenacting the previous situation onto our situation, where now you're also going to be like, okay, like what's up with her? You know what I'm saying? And then instead of maybe you pouring out like 100% into the business deal, then you might find because of my resistance, you sort of become like emotionally withdrawn, or you sort of become like a resistance on your own, you know? And then that sort of like creates like a confirmation bias on my end, because I'm like, aha, this is exactly why I don't trust people. This is exactly why I don't want to go into business with people. And then it always becomes the other person type of situation than me reflecting on myself. Like sort of like, what energy am I pouring into this deal? And am I pouring an energy into this deal that's reenacting a toxic relationship based on mistrust and like all of these other things? Or am I actually pouring like an organic energy into this deal? And because it can happen like it can happen both ways. Like you can find that I come from a toxic space and I'm with you and I've dealt with my toxicity, and I'm with you and I still experience a different level of toxicity. You get what I'm saying? Sure. So it helps to deal with like past hurt, so that when you're going into a new situation, you're able to differentiate. Am I experiencing this for it because the relationship is just headed that way, or the relationship was just meant to be that way? Or am I experiencing what I'm experiencing because I'm projecting part of my past hurts, my past traumas?
Sure. That is so good. Thank you for breaking down that concept. You also mentioned something. It's to be hyper vigilant, which obviously causes mistrust. And we're still obviously talking about the concept of unforgiveness and how it affects that. So how do you usually see people being hyper vigilant and it obviously leading to mistrust?
It's just being hyper aware, because obviously like if I'm hyper aware of something, then I'm going to look at it using a magnifying scope. And sometimes a magnifying scope will like look at a cat and make you think that it's a lion.
Sure.
Type of situation. So if you're hyper vigilant of everything, then you're overcritical of like even like the smallest things, you know. So like, for example, you don't respond to my email on time, you know, and maybe you're driving, or you have a family emergency, or like whatever, or you cancel a meeting last minute. And maybe there's like a really like serious hectic emergency, but because of like a previous experience that I've had, I then take that, then I create assumptions, and in this thought leads to this thought, and this thought leads to this thought, and then my response to you, even if you say, Nqobile, I had like a serious emergency that I couldn't avoid, or blah, 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 but my response to you, instead of like being empathetic and understanding, it's now coming from a place of, like, I wonder if you're lying, like, I wonder if you're telling the truth. And obviously, like, that creates mistrust in our relationship. So then that also adds a dynamic on your end as well, because it sort of interacts with the way that you're now going to respond to me, even in like different situations, or different, different situations, or the same situation, but that might be happening in a different setting.
Sure, that is so good. Do you usually see this play out more in relationships, in terms of all types, or is it usually either romantic relationships, family,
or relationships? Or relationships, because remember, relationships it's basically just how you interact with another person. So wherever there's human interaction, there's space for mistrust, there's space for hurt, because humans are imperfect, you know, and we're constantly evolving, we're constantly working on ourselves, some of us more than others. But whenever you're entering into a space where there's any level of relation with another person, you're obviously opening yourself up to their world. So it's not just going to be about my experiences and what I think, but I somewhat have to make room for your experiences to also play a part in how we're relating with each other. So that's what I'm saying, that it's all relationships across the board, so long as it's with a human being, because humans are unpredictable as well.
Sure. And how you say that unforgiveness affects emotional vulnerability?
How would I say unforgiveness affects emotional vulnerability? It does, because then you sort of become like emotionally reserved or emotionally like emotionally restricted, because obviously, like if I haven't forgiven you, then that means I don't trust you, and if I can't trust you, then I'm not gonna open up to you, right? Again, going back to the business partner example, and I'm intentionally not using a romantic relationship example this time around, because I also just want us to be able to expand concepts over and above just romantic relationships and understand really that it's dynamics that affect us in all different ways. Because I think the overemphasis on romantic relationships whenever we're speaking about interpersonal interactions makes us not be sort of aware that the same dynamic may interact like a different type of relationship, like a friendship, whatever the case is. But anyway, circling back.
That's good. Yeah.
I actually forgot what I was saying. But anyway, so obviously, if there's been hurt and there's been mistrust, and you did something to me, that's difficult for me to forgive, then I'm gonna be withdrawn. Like I'm gonna keep my cards close to my chest. So again, in the business space as well, as that's where I was going. Business space example. If I need you to run a meeting and I'm not available and I'm attending to something, of course I'm not going to trust you. Like whatever feedback that comes out of it, I'm going to question that. I'm going to second guess that. And how are you going to be able to work with somebody that's constantly second guessing your opinions or experiences or your feedback? So it really adds it really adds a complex dynamic that causes like a permanent ripple effect, because now I got hurt somebody else, I bled onto you, and you're gonna leave our working relationship and go work with somebody else, and you become me in that relationship, right? Same thing with romantic relationships. Like if I'm with someone that doesn't trust me, then I know what it's like to be with somebody that constantly second guesses you, doesn't believe in you, invalidates you, gaslights you, whatever the case is. And if I exit that relationship, even though I was the recipient of that behavior, but if I exit that relationship and go initiate a different relationship, remember, I've now partook of your baggage. And now I'm going to add the same dynamic onto another third person, fourth person in this instance, who again had nothing to do with the original incident, which was yours to begin with. And again, that's why we always advocate for things like mindfulness, things like, even if it's not therapy per se, because not everybody has the capacity to be in therapy, but just things like just mindfulness and being aware of yourself and being aware of what is it that you're pouring into the different spaces in your life, and what of that is yours, and what of that is something that you got from somebody else, so that we stop carrying baggages that are not meant to be ours to carry, and so that we heal from things and stop like projecting them onto other people as we go along.
That's good. I love that you mentioned the fact that not everybody might be able to afford to be in therapy. And then you also mentioned mindfulness. What are some methods or tools that somebody can go maybe apply after this to try and be mindful of their experiences, where they are, so that they can allocate themselves to how they interact with the world?
I think just overall self-development, and having conversations with yourselves, because I advocate for mindfulness as using different mindfulness skills to facilitate that ability to have those conversations with yourself. I think I say this probably 100 times a day, and I've probably said this a million times already. We cannot heal wounds we can't see, So if I'm not going to stop and reflect on where is this hurt coming from? Then I don't know again like how to navigate it or like how to work with it, you know. So the concept of mindfulness and the concept of self-reflection and the concept of having conversations with ourselves and not being scared of ourselves allows us to be able to see what is it that I'm pouring that's a result of what was poured into me, either consciously, subconsciously, or whatever the case is. And what can I work on and what do I need to let go of? What can I work on? What can I fix? And what do I need to acknowledge as part of something that has been put onto me, but that I have no control over, so that I can let it go, you know? So again, we have to learn how to look at the mirror. We have to learn how to have those intimate and comfortable conversations with ourselves. We always advocate for therapy because the therapeutic space is one of the spaces that, you know, provides you with a platform to do that better and to get there quicker with the help of a professional. But I mean, there's various things now I think that people can use. Obviously, the levels of like the situation or the context differ. The contexts always differ, you know. But like the main point is to constantly just be at a space where at the end of the day, able to reflect what happened to me today, what did I learn, what hurt me, what made me feel good, what made me feel sad, what did I achieve, what did I lose, what was a positive, what was a negative. These are all questions that I always encourage clients to ask themselves at the end of the day, just as a way of like just reflecting on what it is that happened on that day, so that moving on to the following day, you know exactly either like if I had 5 things that I had to do yesterday and I did 4 and I didn't do 1, you're not bringing in the entire anxiety of the previous day to you onto your new day. You're just saying that, okay, I did these 4 tasks, it's just this one that I didn't do. So you're managing the anxiety that you're projecting onto the next day.
I think that's so good. I think I also suffer from this. We've always been told that always forgive. It's not about the next person, it's always for you. But I think coming towards a concept of feeling like forgiveness is for myself is sometimes a bit hard, especially because the degrees vary. So is forgiveness really for me than it is more for the other person?
Again, I think we touched on this a couple of episodes down, but 100% forgiveness is all about you. Because like I said, if you're not being true to yourself and you're not acknowledging how deeply certain things have hurt you, and, you know, not taking up sort of like the accountability to let go of that hurt or to stop letting that hurt affect you in future in different settings or in different relationships, you know, then you're holding yourself imprisoned. You're becoming a prisoner of those past experiences, even if you know that there's nothing that you had probably done to sort of deserve that. But if you're constantly going to be responding as a product of that experience, then now you're the one that's putting yourself in the prison. You're the one that's now constantly hurting yourself based on what somebody else did to you. So that's why we say that forgiveness is for you. It's all about taking yourself out of the confinements of that experience and allowing you to experience life over and above that one experience, you know, and obviously without invalidating the severity of different experiences and the different traumatic things that are difficult for us to sort of forgive and forget, but also just understanding that it helps to go through a journey of forgiveness. Again, depending on how severe the experience was. Know when it's time to bring in a psychologist, when it's time to speak to a friend, when it's time to just speak to like either somebody you trust or an elder or whatever the case is, when it's time to get admitted. Different levels of things need different levels of interventions. But the point of it all, forgive for you. And like I said in one of the previous videos as well, forgiving for you doesn't mean that I'm now opening up the door for the person that hurt me to come in and hurt me all over again. So it's okay. I can still be guarded. I can still create those boundaries. I can still protect myself from that person. So I'm not forgiving you to advocate for what you did. I'm forgiving you to let myself free from what you did.
Sure. That's good. It's been a dope episode.
Always good stuff.
Any takeaways as we close it?
Any takeaways? Reflect. Let's learn to be a people that converse. Let's learn to be a people that that are desensitized to speaking to ourselves and finding people that we trust, that we can sort of offload these concepts on, because sometimes it's difficult to look at something inwardly, and it's better to look at it like this, like, you know, when it's on. And that's why, again, like, I'll always advocate for journaling, hence my mindfulness journal, because it teaches you the skill of taking something that's internal, putting it on an external device so that you can look at it from a different perspective. And it's easier to solve problems once you're able to look at it from a different angle. So yeah, let's get the mindfulness journal and learn how to have difficult conversations with ourselves.